Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Online Creators Association's Monday night stream. We had a plan tonight, but that plan is not happening because Cecilia can't make it. Cecilia was the one who was doing the research behind that plan. Folks who are coming through on TikTok, we are on Twitch, and by we, I mean I. Argit will be joining at some point. She has not yet jumped in the room. So I've got one person watching on each platform. And I think the one person watching right now might be just Argit having the thing open. Hey.
I've never done this before. Sorry, I'm new here.
Did you forget how to get into the room?
I just didn't push the button, and I thought I pushed the button. Totally fine.
But yeah, right before we got on the call, we were talking about memes, and specifically I was talking about how interesting it is that Nun Pizza with Left Beef has had more staying power as an idea in the cultural consciousness than lolcats, in that like Nun Pizza with Left Beef is still funny, and like new people still find Nun Pizza with Left Beef funny, which is significantly less the case for lolcats. Which is interesting because Icon Has Cheeseburger, the website, and Nun Pizza with Left Beef, the post, arrived at the internet in the same week, same month, very near each other. And Icon Has Cheeseburger had a best-selling book at the top of the New York Times bestseller list for Other, I think, for 14 weeks. And it makes a really good example, actually, of one of the things that makes it really hard to talk about memetics when people are thinking about internet memes, which is the fact that things that are really successful at getting spread really far really quickly are not necessarily evolutionarily that is not necessarily a successful evolutionary strategy. And like it's harder to make this argument now than it was 3 years ago, but like a virus that tears through the whole population and kills a bunch of the people who had that virus, more likely to be eradicated than a virus that kind of gives you the sniffles. Things that make a really big impact really fast and hard are likely to burn through their own supply, and they wind up not having staying power because people lose interest, people get sick of it. Somebody named Jimbo Joe 000 in the TikTok chat has said today, JR, and then I think they may be trying to make fun of me for just talking off the top of my head. Not entirely sure, but there's something going on there. Jimbo Joe 000 says, you say every other word. Yeah, no, that's going to happen. I'm not going to get better at that in the course of this live.
Totally fine. So many people like to act like it's the worst thing ever, and it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you hate it so much that it's going to interrupt your ability to handle this, like, I can't help you. That's something that people learn to get better at over the course of months or years, not over the course of minutes. So, so it's not happening. What was I saying about memes?
They exist. I got myself distracted again too, because it reminded me that I had went to Photobucket a while ago to find a specific image that I knew it was there. And Photobucket is like, by the way, we're going to like mess your whole life up because that's what we do. And that reminded me that I downloaded uh, so many pictures that I still had on PhotoBucket because it had been free and like uninterrupted for so long. So I have a lot of like really obscure, like weird ones from
Mhm.
back in the day.
Yeah.
That a lot of them, I don't think they would even be considered memes at this point because the definition has been revised over the years too. For like, there's some sort of like humor meter now that people don't really realize about what it is and what it isn't in
Well, I mean,
regards to
like in the
memes and
colloquial sense, memes are jokes that take place on the internet, um, and especially jokes for which the internet or telecommunications is a fundamental medium. But in the academic sense, a meme is just the unit of replication of information. So, like a meme is any one of those images would be a meme in the sense that they are reproducible. Um,
yes.
and well, like one of my favorite examples, lolcats in the academic sense is three different memes. It is the cute pictures of cats meme, the image macro meme, and
Yes.
the lolspeak meme.
Yes.
Those three things stacked together form what academically is called a memeplex. Really hate the word memeplex. It was a dumb choice for what to call things that are made of memes. But
Like I get it, but I agree.
yeah. Um, I don't know. We didn't call things that are made of genes gene plexes. We called them organisms. That's a much cooler way to go with it.
Right? Which that kind of brings up another portion of it too, because like sometimes a new word will be birthed into language as a result of internet culture, especially in the realm of memes.
Mm-hmm.
Versus there's other situations where people are like, oh no, we don't need more words for that. We will adjust existing words in order to comply with whatever we've just deemed as being societal norms for the moment on that too. And that blows my mind too. Like a mouse. Because that's funny too, because they were like, because there's they somebody was like, oh, it kind of looks like a mouse because of how it's like shaped or something. Like that is
Yeah,
so
it's distantly shaped like a small rodent and had a tail at the time.
GIF. You say it GIF, right?
Jive.
Hi Fifi. Oh my god. Um,
Plague on Humanity says I say it like Jift without the T.
It's making me think of. Didn't Jenna Marbles do a rant about this? My name's Jenna, not Genna.
Mm,
Oh god.
GIF like the
They
peanut
give
butter.
like butter. Oh, I wish I could remember that other silly meme with the person that was just like, if cough, spells like off and blah 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 blah, you could spell potato like, and then it was just this ridiculous.
Yeah, it's fish. It's the GH in cough is pronounced like an F. The I can't remember the word, but there's a word where the letter O makes an I sound. And then
Oh, I found it. If I may read it.
yeah.
So the correct way to spell potato, if GH can stand for P in hiccup or hiccough, right? And OUGH can stand for O as in dough. And PTH can stand for T like in thesis. And EIGH can stand for A as in neighbor. And TTE can stand for T like in gazette. and EAU can stand like O in plateau, then the correct way to spell potato, and I will type it in chat because this. Gosh, it's too long. E-A-U. There we go. Potato.
It looks a lot more to me like it's a failure to say spaghetti.
Yes, it is. Bless you, right?
Do you know why the letters GH show up at the end of so many words that don't end in GH or that don't end in a G sound?
I have theories off the top of my head because of how I know that English is just kind of like weird like that because of how many other languages it pulled from. But
It
please
has
do.
nothing to do with the other languages.
No. Oh, I hate the most. Okay, please continue.
Older forms of the English language had a sound.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
GH was just the popular way to transliterate that when they started writing down words. That phoneme had, or phoneme, can't remember.
Yeah.
That sound has fallen out of how English is pronounced.
Great.
But that spelling is retained in a lot of words that used to be pronounced that way.
Okay.
Like
I love and hate that so much.
Like daughter used to be Dochter.
Okay.
I'm sure it wasn't actually Dochter. I'm just not good at pronouncing that sound because it's not in the language I speak.
Yeah, no, I can't. That's one of those things that I've never been able to do. I can roll my R's. I can get pretty much any other sound, but anything that happens back there, my tongue just doesn't do it.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of I don't know if we've ever talked about it on stream, but Cecilia and I once spent like a long time reading this absolutely insane book called A Pickle for the Knowing Ones.
I feel like that sounds familiar.
I'm pulling it up on Project Gutenberg right now.
Okay. Plague on Humanity says it seems like a necromancer spell to make a collection of ghouls. That's yes.
All right, so to mankind at large, the time is come at last, the great day of regoizing. What is that? Why I tell you, thou's 3 kings is raised, you mean, should know, raised on the first royal arch in the world, almost, not quite, but very hew up upon, so they are good mark to be seen, so the women's like to see the front, and all the people loves to see them, as the Quakers will come and peep slyly and feel glad and say how the do, friend Father George Washington is in the center, King Adams is at the right hand, the present king at the left hand, Father George with his hat on the other hats of the middle king, with his sword, king. There are no periods anywhere in this book.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's not true. If we scroll all the way to the end of the book, we have this section in which we have the transcriber's note. The block of punctuation on a page by itself is inexplicably left unexplained in this edition. Dexter wrote before it in the second edition. For the Mr. Printer, the knowing ones may complain of the book, of my book, the first edition had no stops. I put in enough here, and they pepper and salt it as they please.
I love that. Like, I see. Oh, you wanted some punctuation? Well, here's some punctuation. You
This
figure it
guy was
out.
absolutely unhinged, but it was very funny. But yeah, there's Cecilia and I spent like a long time just trying to read chunks of this and make sense of what he's saying. And there gets to be a point where you can't help but read it in an accent.
Yes.
And it starts very quickly to sound kind of like a contemporary sort of southern-ish accent, what would have been a Massachusetts accent of the time.
And
He's from Massachusetts. He was what was it? Lord Timothy Dexter, I believe Lord of Newburyport. He just decided that he was a lord. He insisted on referring to the President of the United States as a king.
Okay.
Like fully just committed to, no, America is a monarchy like Britain.
Just in a different typeface. Got it.
Yeah.
I love it. Like,
yeah.
There's so many people that are like, sorry.
Yeah,
like,
right
again,
here.
I know it sounds like kind of unhinged, but the people who are like, oh, the good old days, the good old days. And then you see shit like this and be like, okay, really, please do go on. When were the good old days? Because there was always at least somebody to be the squeaky wheel and be like, look, here's your punctuation. Do with it as you please.
Yeah, the start of the second paragraph of the book. What is a president? Answer: a king. A king. Bonparty the Great has as much power as a king, and Ort have and is a Massey. He has for the good of mankind. He has as much power as any king. For Gratways back there must be a head some where, or the people is lost like wild geese when they loose the gander. Two-legged want a head, if four-legged both, and two-legged fowls. The name of the president is to please the people at large. There are a lot of places where like you cannot figure out what the word means until you read the whole sentence out loud and just hear it as like a word in an accent.
I wonder if they're doing that weird thing too, like my dad does, whereas like if he is feeling like the word should be said louder in his head, he will capitalize words like at random like that.
Yeah, no, I mean,
now when the South give way to the North, and the North gave way to the South, or
yeah, I mean, like it's not a popular like formal convention, but I think most of us do that when we text.
I mean, yeah. Again, not a criticism, but that also to me, I find that instant kind of correlation there to be very interesting as well, because because we've made the rules, and there's always people being like, well, why can we just not decide to like throw the rules out the window when we're like trying to do something? This is more art than literature in a way. Like I think that's interesting too. Same thing with texting. Sometimes texting is just such a personal expression of identity that you throw all of the grammatical correctness out of the window to get your point across.
Yeah, and like the value of grammar is in maximizing the reliability with which different audiences will parse the sentences similarly. That is not always the goal of writing. When you're writing a text message, you generally have a pretty good idea of exactly who's going to be reading it, and you don't need to write it such that it will be easily parsed by anyone else.
That I will link it to you as well. It's kind of one of those facts of a facts kind of situations, because it's a Tumblr post that was brought to Reddit because it's easier to find. If you've never seen this is hilarious.
We have Shakespeare is not pretentious. Fans of Shakespeare are pretentious. Shakespeare is 1,200 dirty jokes strung together by increasingly ridiculous plot lines, increasingly homosexual characters. Don't let the archaic language fool you. Followed by, I had a college professor who took this exact tack. In class, we were required to refer to him not as Shakespeare, but as Willie Shakes, and instructed us to view him as the bastard love child of Jay-Z and Tim Burton. Meme culture wasn't a thing quite yet, this was 2009, but in today's parlance, you would say we were encouraged to treat him as a meme. One kid in class did an introduction to Shakespeare for a presentation and called it The Fresh Prince of Stratford, and did a song filk of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, in which Fresh Prince was used as a pun with Fresh Prince at least twice. Somebody else took to calling him Wheezy. I got to hear stuff like the plotline of Macbeth being described as, so Macbeth was promised to be king by these witches, but he was actually a pretty nice guy. And then Lady Macbeth just murder the king, don't be a pussy. And then he went all saw on everybody, which is actually not a bad summary of Macbeth. I got to introduce the whole class to my theory that Hamlet is actually a black comedy, not a tragedy. And for the first time, I ever got a professor to agree with me. There was a set of YouTube videos at the time called Sassy Gay Friend, which took a crack at Shakespeare, and someone brought them in and we watched them and got quizzed on them. And I walked out of that class with a far greater understanding and appreciation of Shakespeare than when I went in. Putting him on par with modern-day celebrities and artists somehow made him come alive in a way I've never seen before, even though we were reading the original texts with all the these and thous. This is so cool. Remember, Shakespeare didn't write for the future. He wrote for the poor masses of his present to keep them entertained and drunk. Lol. Which, yeah, I more or less agree with all of that.
I still, ever since then, Willie Shakes. There's that, which also became a meme in itself too, where they put like glasses over and do they put sunglasses on like the classic William Shakespeare bust that everybody is familiar with, and then they put like vaporwave colors all over it too. I love it.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's currently doing I think like semester abroad or summer program or something at Oxford in Shakespeare. And she's presenting a pitch to perform Much Ado About Nothing as through the lens of the early 2010s pop punk scene.
Oh, cool!
It's amazing. I'm gonna see if I can.
It's like I love those kinds of things too, because sometimes they fail miserably, and other times they knock it out of the park so good that you're just kind of like, wow.
All right, so here's a slide that Riley has posted publicly. Much Ado About Masculinity. Double standards in relation to gender performance are also affected by the men in the scene. Many bands were also considered inherently gay to some extent due to their aesthetics, personal conduct, or the nature of their music. A few even embraced these reputations with the intent of reclamation. This posed a very contradictory view of the masculine ideal, especially in the mid-2000s when gay marriage and homosexuality were particularly contentious topics. Despite the popularity of stage gay and general willingness to engage in gender nonconformity, very few musicians in the scene were out publicly. Sexuality remained either decidedly heteronormative or non-committally ambiguous. To put it in Pete Wentz's words, fair game above the waist. The expectation of traditional heterosexual masculinity continued to loom. Performing homosexuality was less a celebration of personal truth and more a rejection of society at large. And then Brendan Urie, talking with Paper Magazine in 2018, did you ever find yourself as a young man having to really come to terms with your sexuality? It was never weird for me. I know that I made a few people uncomfortable when somebody gets uncomfortable about me doing what I used to call stage gay. It kind of presses me to want to do it more. What's stage gay? For our first headline tour, I would go up to Ryan, our guitar player, and kiss him on the neck or kiss him on the mouth, and he would be so mad. I was like, I just want to kiss you, bro. I would hang out with friends, and after 5 or 6 hours, or 5 or 6 beers, we'd just kind of be smooching on each other. People just get hammered and fool around. And with the comment, I cannot stress enough that this is dramaturgical work for a project about a Shakespeare play. That's Lung Thief on Tumblr, by the way. Which she insists on repeatedly explaining to people is a reference to a Fall Out Boy song and not just a really clever way of saying she'll take your breath away. I really think that she should just let people infer the meaning of her username. But
See, and that's wonderful too. Like, I love that too when the person's username is like in such a way that people will assume something.
mhm. No,
Because I still,
I honestly do really like that because then you get like two meanings for free because people will make the assumption and then you get to correct them and then they have both associations.
because, and you said lung thief.
Hmm.
Because it's like, again, and like just without getting too much into it, I had a very weird childhood as far as like healthcare stuff
Hmm.
goes, and I knew somebody who'd had a lung transplant.
Hmm.
So there's lots of doctor's appointments and like events and stuff that would go to where they would have lungs all over the place. And I'm just imagining them stealing these anatomically correct lungs that are on display. They're not actual real people's lungs, but that's what I think of when I hear that. So anyway.
Mm.
And everyone would have thought like of take your breath away. uh, anyway.
Yeah. Do you want to talk more about memes?
I was just gonna say, like, I could maybe post some of my weird ones in Discord because I do have a lot of like really weird
Oh, I was thinking more
old.
like talking about memetics. We were actually
And yep,
discussing on one of the servers I'm in, Sandwich Discourse, about which I have very strong opinions. Uh, the
like the
is a hot
uh,
sandwich.
is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a story about that.
Mm. Do you want to lead with yours?
Sure, because it's not too terribly long. But a few years ago, a friend of mine, in all caps, screamed on Facebook, right? She's like, everybody, tell me, what is a sandwich? I need you to tell me right now. So everybody is listing off all the different sandwiches that we can think of. And she goes, how do I tell this to my mother who invited me over for sandwiches? And there was many hot dogs and a few hamburgers.
Hmm.
And like that was just like basically bun and burger, and like that was about it. And I'm just sitting here just kind of like yeah, I don't know how to help you with that. If somebody invited me over for a sandwich, I mean, like, this is why I ask questions because
Yeah.
I've got trust issues with stuff like this. If anybody says you want to come over and have a sandwich, I'm going to be like, could you please describe the sandwich to me? Because I wouldn't classify those as sandwiches either. They are something different. But anyway.
Yeah. So this is what I wrote in the server where we were discussing this. IMO's sandwich is a cultural food. It's a sandwich if it has roots in the cultural tradition of sandwiches and the people who made it and who eat it intend it to be understood as a sandwich. By this measure, hot dogs are not sandwiches, but also burgers are not sandwiches. They are convergent evolution of food shapes in separate cultures, and because ideas, unlike biological life forms, cannot speciate, after those cultural traditions become common knowledge among the peoples who originated the others, nothing can realistically descend from one without also descend from the other. Sandwiches are so common globally because they're an English cultural food and because England was and is hardcore about colonization and cultural imperialism. It is reasonable to say that every culture affected by English cultural hegemony has a clear right to claim the cultural tradition of sandwich, but projecting that culture backwards onto convergently evolved or even just distantly similar cultural foods that existed prior to that culture's exposure to English hegemony is cultural imperialism. Argit, do you have mod?
Yeah, I
Stuff?
just need a second.
Yeah. But yeah, the thing that I really think the thing that I am thinking about that I want to talk about that is the reason that I suggested we talk about memes is the idea that ideas can't speciate. Because like that's one of the big things that so like reproduction of biological organisms is complicated, and particularly sexual reproduction is an extremely specific process that only happens in a very particular way. And if any of millions of possible things go even a little bit wrong, it doesn't work, and like produces nothing that can then reproduce. And one of the ways that we determine whether things are the same or separate species is if those things can reproduce together and produce viable offspring. So, like, all of the different breeds of horses are the same species because they can reproduce with each other. Horses and donkeys are not the same species because while you can breed a horse with a donkey and get a mule, mules cannot reproduce. So speciation is like that's how you get branches that don't then like merge back together whenever they encounter each other again. That is not possible with ideas because there is no single mechanism for replicating ideas. There are millions, and we keep fucking inventing new ones. And every I want to pull up this fucking Wikipedia article. The critics of memetics. Luis Benitez Barbesca, a critic of memetics, calls it a pseudoscientific dogma and a dangerous idea that poses a threat to the serious study of consciousness and cultural evolution, among other things. As factual criticism, he refers to the lack of a code script for memes as the DNA is for genes, and the fact that meme mutation mechanism, an idea going from one brain to another, is too unstable, low replication accuracy and high mutation rate, which would render the evolutionary process chaotic. And the thing about that is, how do you look at the world such as it is shaped by information as it exists now and not conclude that it is the result of an unstable and chaotic process? Like, the criticism here is basically memes can't be real, or memetics can't be a real way of thinking about things, because if memetics was a real way of thinking about things, that would mean very scary things about government.
Because that's a really interesting thing too. And like, again, I still just can't, relating to other languages in that case, because that's how my brain goes, is that especially in the English language, like a lot of the language has been kind of nailed down, so to speak, to such a degree that people are like, well, there's not a lot of wiggle room. There's no room for new words. There's no room to, or there's no need to get rid of, words or letters or what have you. That's, maybe not as necessary as they used to be, because when has that ever happened? It's like, well, many, many times. You just don't notice it for whatever reason. Versus, like, again, in starting to study the Japanese language, there's a lot of their words are more so based on a concept and a thought that you need to sit and think with a little bit, rather than say this precise word is this precise definition for this exact context at all times. Which,
I mean, English is also not like that. There are just people who really like to pretend it is.
Exactly. Okay. Sorry, I was just watching that again too, because I'm like, I hope it doesn't mean that there's another person going to come back. Not that it matters, but
yeah. But words, brain. Memes. The thing we were talking about earlier with like the weird ways that words are spelled.
Yeah.
The reason that persists, the reason we don't just round words down to the or there are a few reasons why we don't just like try to make words spelled exactly the way they're pronounced. First of all, many different dialects of English have different pronunciations that would require different spelling. So like somebody with a Boston accent would use a lot fewer R's than
Yes.
somebody with a Texas accent in the same words. Um, so like regional
Me
difference.
with my Midwestern. Yeah, I say bag. Everybody else says bag, apparently.
Yeah. So how's that spelled? BAYG?
Exactly.
And then there's like the pin pen merger, um,
Yes.
where like in
Sauce
accent,
saucepan
yeah, yeah, uh,
instead of saucepan.
yeah. I remember a story where somebody was talking about like proposing a product to make, like to order a line of for like swag to give away to conference, and they were pitching this to like a director who was from Texas, and they were pitching pins. Um, and she said, "Do you mean pin like you write with, or pin like a button?" Uh, and there's like a pin. We mean pins. Uh, and she was like, "Yeah, but like a pin like you write with, or a pin like a button?" Because she fully did not hear the difference between the words
Yeah.
pin and pen.
Yep.
Um,
Totally get that too. That's
mhm.
one of those wonderful things about Southern dialects that I love too, because like there's one person that they had never seen chest of drawers written out. And when you're from the South, from her whole family, everybody, it's a chest of drawers.
Mhm.
So they thought it was one word this whole time. No, chest of drawers, chest of drawers.
Yeah, I mean that's how things become one word like that. I think I may have said this on stream recently, but do you know where the word ampersand comes from?
You did tell me that, and I blissfully forgot about it. This anyway, continue.
I mean, it is essentially that, exactly that, happening to the phrase "and" per se, and, which
Yep.
per se means like in the capacity of. So like when you say "and" per se, and, you're saying I'm using the word "and" here, and I'm referring to the fact that it is the word "and." I'm not saying "and" as in I'm about to say another thing. Because like it used to be that in some parts of the world, parts of the English-speaking world, at some times it has been considered a letter and part of the alphabet. And so like the alphabet song would end with "and" per se, and because it
Yes.
was children saying it, it got smashed into a single sound. And
Was
those
it
kids
the
grew up
thorn?
understanding what
Like the thorn used to be there too, but
thorn is a different thing. The thorn, a different thing happened to thorn.
okay.
Thorns were like a possible character in spelling English, that when movable type was invented, um,
That's right.
when movable type was invented, uh, type foundries had to make decisions about what letters to what characters to forge, and usually Thorn didn't make the cut. Most fonts uh, didn't have Thorn characters, so Thorn very quickly fell out of English spelling. And in a lot of cases, when people were typesetting something with thorns in them, they would use a Y, because a Y just sort of approximated the shape reasonably okay-ish, I guess. I don't really see it, but it's a call that many people made. And the thorn, the sound that a thorn makes is like the sound that they would use th for,
Yeah.
which is why so many words in old timey documents spell the ye, because it's thorn e, because thorny. So like why ye is pronounced the. But I was gonna say about like those weird differences in spelling is like one of the like those differences in spelling carry important information. Like when something
Yeah.
ends with a t sound, but that t is spelled ette, that is not just telling you pronounce this t, it's also telling you when you try and figure out from context clues what this word means, look to French.
Yes. Versus, it was Merriam-Webster, wasn't it? They decided that they wanted to try to, in modern day terms, try to sanitize the English language too, and that's how we got the color with the without the
Noah Webster was very aggressive about trying to eliminate unnecessary spelling. One of the ones that he was a big advocate for that didn't catch on is IZ.
Which, speaking of memes, we do that all the time now.
Yeah, but I think we feel the same way about it that people back then felt about it, which is that like Z is kind of a
it's like an add-on noise instead of.
This word has baggage, and I'm kind of meaning to evoke that baggage. I just want to acknowledge that. But like we think of Z as a kind of exotic letter. Like it's a letter that belongs in strange and rare words. And so putting it in a word that we use like probably in every paragraph we write feels wrong.
I feel like that's one of the reasons too. Like I do enjoy the letter Z and the letter X for that same kind of reason, because not only are they a little bit more like exotic because they are not as widely used, but the sounds that they make are a little bit different also in comparison to the rest of the alphabet, it feels like. Especially with like with the letter X, like it's when you think about the words that it is in, you wouldn't always expect it to be an X, like xylophone. I would expect it to start with the letter Z, not the letter X. And I've completely forgotten like all other words except for like taxi, which again, that why isn't it like a K?
Box.
But yes, and box.
I mean, because off the top of my head, TACKSY sounds like an adjective. So it looks like an adjective. I don't know that that's the reason. I have no idea what the reason is that we spell taxi with an X, but it does immediately occur to me that if we spelled taxi, like
I would spell it TAKCI, taxi. Tack, it's a beautiful game. Sorry. My silly brain, like I can't.
But yeah, like we have rules like that. Like if a word ends in Y, it's probably an adjective or adverb.
And that's one of those things that like when people say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, but I can never remember.
Yeah, and like that's why there are words that seem like they should end in Y that don't, because if they ended in Y, it would be easier to mistake them. I mean, this is speculation, to be clear. I do not know that this is specifically the reason, but I do think that this is a selective pressure that will tend towards favoring some spellings over others, that there is a selective pressure away from ending nouns with the letter Y. Because it's confusing.
Yes. We don't want to hurt ourselves with thinking.
Yeah, and I'm actually the reading group tomorrow. We're doing politics in the English language, and I was just annotating it today.
I keep forgetting to join.
This is one of my favorite essays. I'm very excited about doing it, but it's so Orwell published this about 3 years before he published 1984, and if 1984 is a science fictional heightening of Orwell's beliefs about language, this is just him saying what he thinks about language. And like if you look at Newspeak, I'm just gonna like fucking read from the context statement that I wrote for this because I'm about to make the same argument that I've already written. A major dimension of control in 1984 is the party's official language, Newspeak. In Chapter 5 of the book, a minor character, Syme, says, "Don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it." He goes on, "The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there will be no thought as we understand it now. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness."
Hmm.
So in 1984, the party embraces the hard version of linguistic relativity, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, often called linguistic determinism, which is that like language is strictly thought is strictly limited to language, and like what you have language for is the limits of what you can think. And that's widely not a claim that is taken seriously. But the soft version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the soft version of linguistic relativism, or relativity, is that language influences our thoughts, and there's a ton of evidence for that. Like influence is what we're capable of thinking, what we think to prioritize. There's this really interesting study that I need to look up and like download at some point, because I reference it all the time, and I read about it like 6 years ago, so I should have a better idea of exactly what it is and how credible it is. But they did this study with a bunch of people who speak both German and French, and a bunch of them they asked to spell or to describe a key. They asked all of them to describe a key. A bunch of them they asked to describe it in German. A bunch of them they asked to describe it in French. And this was a mix of, on both sides, it was a mix of people whose native language is German, and they learned French as a second language, and vice versa. The people who described them in German significantly more frequently described keys as like large, iron, cold, strong, like steel. And the people who described it in French were significantly more likely to describe keys as delicate, golden, subtle, refined, or fine. In French, the word for key is a feminine noun. In German, it's a masculine noun. And the hypothesis that this paper is arguing for is that the gender with which you approach the word affects the associations you're going to form with that word on such a granular and immediate level that like literally just asking somebody to describe a word or to describe a thing in a language that genders that thing, they will describe it. They will tend to describe it in terms of the gender stereotypes of that gender.
See, that is interesting. I love thinking about stuff like that too, because I still, when I was learning Spanish for the first time, I was just kind of like, what do you mean there's gender on things? Like, why is everything gendered? I didn't understand. And I also think it's very interesting that I was thinking for a German key that they would describe it more, we'll say rustic, because I'm thinking in media terms. Every image that I've seen, like watching like the Grimm, for example, that's the most recent like kind of retelling of Tales of Grimm, whatever, the Grimm brothers books and stuff like that, because they do that. It's that more kind of like more so like gritty and heavier type stuff like that. But there is intricate stuff too. And I thought like, isn't it like Beauty and the Beast or something like that too, that features a key that's really kind of ornate and delicate like that too? I watch too much TV.
But I am now thinking about something that I noticed. I don't know to what extent this trend holds up, but I was doing a lot of Duolingo French before I went to France. And one of the things I noticed is that vehicles, like in general, are feminine. Like car is a feminine noun, plane is a feminine noun, but bus is a masculine noun, taxi is a masculine noun, And what it seems like to me is vehicles are servant class. So they are feminine. They are masculine when they are vehicles with jobs.
I'm absolutely following. That makes sense too. Again, that's just that weird.
And I mean, like, I don't know to what extent that holds up across French, but it was really working for me to just think, like, is the sentence I'm trying to translate right now a vehicle with or without a job? And if the vehicle has a job, then I use masculine pronouns.
Right. And like now I'm just sitting here about trying to think about the different words that I know in the 3 different languages that I'm familiar with. You know, but I'm not really good at it. But anyway, I always think that's so interesting too. Like gendering words too much is too much.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought because I noticed that the bot did not post halfway through.
It only posts when the timer hits, and there have been at least 20 messages since the last time it posted.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that it could do that because I've talked with one friend who was like setting up their Streamlabs stuff. I'm like, you could do this. I did not realize that it had exceptions you could program into it, which is wonderful too.
Yeah, it's so that you don't wind up spamming the chat. Like if you've got something you want to like stay on screen so people will notice it, and like you got a stream chat that like moves pretty quickly, you might set it up to post every 5 minutes. But you don't want to set it to post every 5 minutes just no matter what, because if you're having a slow stream night, it could be every other message, and that looks bad.
That's very annoying.
So if you say like every 5 minutes, check if there have been at least 30 messages since the last time this posted. If yes, post it. And we have that set up here, so it only posts the Patreon and Discord ad if there have been at least 20 messages since the last time it posted it.
That's really cool. Oh, it's crap like that is why I love technology so much. It's like, okay, I need you to do the thing, except for when these criteria either are or are not met. Like, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So anyway, send us your favorite memes. Actually, I shouldn't volunteer that suggestion on your behalf. You may send me, if anybody wants to send me memes at any time, I will rate them for you.
Send Target your favorite memes.
You get bonus points if you've never seen it before.
I have a footnote in the context statement after the thing about Syme, because this isn't really relevant to the point I'm making, but it is one of my favorite things about the book. The text goes on in narration. One of these days, thought Winston with a sudden deep conviction, Syme will be vaporized. He's too intelligent. He sees too clearly and speaks too plainly. The party does not like such people. Sometime later in the text, Winston notices that Syme's name no longer appears in the listings where it should. Like, Syme is extremely pro-party, very enthusiastically down for the project of Newspeak, probably one of the best minds working on it. And he's eliminated because he is too comfortable. Like, he has too much, like, his knowledge, understanding, and experience of what he's doing is too coherent. Yeah, Syme is my favorite character in 1984.
It has been such a long time. My Swiss cheese brain, like I remember.
Syme is the kind of character who it would be reasonable to not remember who I'm talking about, having just finished the book.
Okay,
fantastic. He's in 2 scenes, and by he's in 2 scenes, I mean he's in 1 scene, and then he is pointedly not in any other scenes.
Okay.
Like,
because like I remember like the important takeaways.
There's a scene he's in, and there's a scene where Winston notices he isn't.
Okay, that makes sense too. Because it's like, those couple of books that we had to read like growing up, like 1984 and was it Fahrenheit 451 and The Giver and stuff like that. Like those three books, they're not the same book, but I have the same takeaway from the three of them.
What is that takeaway?
Basically, humanity can suck a lot, and you gotta like constant vigilance that shit.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like again, I cannot keep those thoughts together long enough to actually form like coherent like intelligent sentences, but I can condense it down to those kind of thoughts. Like
Yeah.
trauma, man, sick.
I think they're all anti-totalitarian books. I think that they all have different politics around like what
Mm-hmm.
instead of totalitarianism there should be.
Yeah.
Like George Orwell has a quote that I really love to read to people who argue that he was not a communist. Well, because 1984 is transparently extremely critical of the Soviet Union, and so but in his essay "Why I Write," just because he really like he's very serious about speaking plainly and making sure that you can understand what he means. He wrote an essay called "Why I Write," and then he said in actual explicit words, everything I've written since 1946 or so has been written either explicitly or implicitly against totalitarianism and for democratic socialism as I understand it.
This is one of those things, like it was both very late in the stream, but that's one of those things too that like I don't know. First of all, I don't recall that I've ever like had that kind of direct discussion about him in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I've ever even heard that quote before. Like again, my Swiss cheese brain, I may have forgotten.
Yeah, no,
like,
people don't know that part because it's really bad for people who want to use 1984 to argue that it's not socialist, or like very frequently the people are trying to use 1984 to argue against socialism. So the quote that says this is an anti-totalitarian book that is pro-socialism, not a strong point in favor of that argument.
It makes me think of like Helen Keller. Because, and I don't know how much you or anybody else watching is like familiar with this, and I am. This is why it's still fresh in my mind because I recently learned it too. Because like everybody thinks of Helen Keller, like, oh, what like an amazing story of this person who went like completely deaf and blind and learned how to do all these. She was total badass like activist apparently with some questionable thoughts because she's humanity, but
extremely dedicated communist who was a very influential leader in the American communist movement.
And I was just kind of like, why am I learning this so many years later? How come, so I was just kind of like, oh, I couldn't even ask my question. How come I never heard about this before? But we know the answer. It's propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the 1950s during the Red Scare, every topic, the way it got taught was reconfigured to make sure that it could not be interpreted as suggesting a positive feeling about communism. Not because there was any top-down mandate, but because teachers were getting arrested. Teachers were being dragged before the House Committee for Un-American Activity. And like there was no rule. There was no top-down statement saying you can't teach communism. There was only everybody knows that if somebody thinks it feels like your lessons are communist, then you are putting yourself at risk of going to jail. So the norm, and like that's not even like you can't even tell other teachers when you're talking about why you teach the way you teach. You can't say I'm teaching this way to avoid looking un-American. So like that, even the motive behind it was lost. Like the reason that American high schools focus so much on like literary symbolism, it's a style of interpretation called formalism, and it's so popular because it's the only style that does not involve talking about the beliefs of the author. And every great American novel was written explicitly to say, hey, capitalism's really bad and hurts everyone.
But we're going to make it work this time. I'm sorry.
And formalism is the only way. Formalism is the only approach to interpreting an explicitly anti-capitalist novel that does not identify the anti-capitalism. Which is not to say that formalism is a bad way of interpreting texts. Formalism has its merits, and there are things it is good for. It should be a tool in your toolkit. It is also overwhelmingly the only way that Americans are taught to read texts, because it's the only way to read texts that permits you to avoid understanding their politics.
That is a lot. Okay, I just noticed the time. We're coming up on the end. I actually Googled Umer meme because Plague on Humanity was saying that we like the Umer meme. I did not know that that was the name of that format, but I do know what you're talking about. I have seen quite a few. Like it's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I paused because I'm assuming that you're Googling it because I don't know how to explain like an image.
Yeah. Yeah,
I didn't know it had a name.
Fucking assumes.
Yeah.
Specifically the one that's just the Umer. Let's see. Open image in new tab. The Umer, internally crying on the inside. Oh, hang on. I shared the tab, not the window. The Umer, internally crying on the inside. Thinks opinions are actually superior for posting Wojak memes while losing respect from a lot of people. Can't think of a clever joke, so resorts with insults and Wojak memes. Actually laughs at own jokes. I got nothing. More out of ideas than Family Guy. Plague, is this the one you're thinking of? Lacking a prefix, a near infinite amount of potential, not unique yet, patiently waiting to become more than an Umer? Because that one's funny.
That is hilarious.
The Umer, extremely vertical individual, without organs, nomadic. Be nice with him, please, okay?
Oh my god.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We are going to sign off now. We will see you on Thursday, hopefully, to talk about the analytics from TikTok's latest report on content management, because they released Words Brain, the spreadsheets with the data this time, with some of the data, and we want to. I cannot open that link. StreamYard does not give me the capacity to copy and paste from messages. And also, we're about to sign off. But thanks, everybody, for coming. Good night.